happening.
Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode 15 of SEO Fight Club. So we'll just dive right in. Let me share my screen. Got my nerd goggles on. I don't normally show those publicly.
So have you been doing it blind?
Yeah. You know, part of the reason why I'm like, who, what?
That's why I run the comment section.
Exactly. All right. So, stop sharing. Come on. Don't do that.
Those are really sharp, by the way. The only thing you're missing is crying. I don't think they were that bad. Those are pretty good. You get to rock yourself some Army rape classes. That's what we call them, rape prevention classes. Then you're gonna be good.
Yeah, my glasses were quite expensive and really cool until my dog chewed them to holy hell, and now there's little puppy teeth marks all over the frames and on the lenses. But all right, jumping into it. We're SEO Fight Club. If you want to learn about who we are, we have brief bios at the domain listed there. We won't bore you with those details. SEO this week is run by Clint Butler. It's an amazing show where he pours over hundreds of articles about SEO every week, and he boils it down to the 5 or 10 that seem to matter most for that week. And so I used to sink a ton of time going around the web, reading all these articles and trying to figure out which ones are important and trying to sift through all the crap. And I used to probably spend, 20 hours a month just pouring through all that media. And why do it when Clint will do it for you? So just watch this show and get all that time back. So it's absolutely awesome. So Clint, what can people expect?
So this week, only 4 stories. The community was kind of quiet, and 2 of them were actually Google created them, so that kind of works out. And then we also talk about article spinning. I give a brief and a high-level overview of how I do it manually, and then Ted gives his insights. And actually, if you are the adventurous type and you want another business model, Ted offers one up in there that you should certainly check out.
Yeah, that was a cool discussion. So if you ever wondered about how you can turn spinning content white hat, if you ever wondered how you could build a business out of spinning content, that's an excellent conversation. And I love the whole industry potential of it, and you can find out why if you check it out. So it's too late. You can't get in now. We hit the maximum member level in Skype. So we warned you. But if you want to get on the wait list, we will process that wait list first come, first serve. So if you get on there now, when space becomes available, we'll let you know in order of when you join the wait list. So Kyle's going to try and put that on his website too. Might take a little bit, but right now it's at the bottom of the SEO Tool Lab page. And if you didn't get in, sorry you didn't get in. Do get on the wait list, though. We will let you know as soon as you can get in.
As a user, I'll tell you right now that when you were building it up, there's like every 10 members you get, 3 or 4 people would leave. And now that it's locked out, everyone's kind of got on the clue that don't leave or you're gone. So, and we're putting out some really good information in that group. So if you didn't join, you certainly did miss out.
So today's topic bomb is the name mystery. And if you were in the Skype group, then you got to see some of this play out live, like in real time. But today we're going to dive into this name mystery. But first, we need a little history on how we got to the mystery. Sorry for the rhyme. So on April 20th of this month, this is all like very modern, current research. We ran a test to see if the exact same test pages would rank the same for two different keywords on each test page. So keyword A, keyword B, exact same pages, exact same tests. You're like, will they come up the same? And largely they did, except for some of the control swap. So they didn't. So that was interesting. But it begged the question, well, what about the same keyword just back to back to back? If we search it in quick succession, are we going to see these variations? And we suspected we would. We've known about the minute random variance for quite a long time, but we've only academically included it into our testing, probably within the past year that I know of. So we checked the same keyword on these test pages 5 minutes apart, and the variance was all over, as we anticipated. So we can see where everything jumped. And what was interesting about this is that if you have sufficient signal from your factors, they kind of lock into place. It's when everything is kind of scored relatively closely, those things appear to shake up. And that's what we generally observe when we see this variance, is it's kind of a tiebreaker condition. How does Google fairly handle ties? What do you think about that, Kyle?
Well, I've seen this for a while in the single variable tests that I run, that the control pages will shift. I usually manually check my results, but not usually within 5 minutes apart. So I thought it was pretty cool to see this happen so rapidly. That part surprised me, that it was that quick of a shift.
Yeah, I always suspected it was like, on the term of hours. Like, I knew it was several times a day, but it wasn't until I tested minutes apart that I realized how real time this random variance is. And the problem, of course, is that in that test, we had a test case, something with signal on it that generally should beat all controls, be affected by the variance. So we found that the weakest of our test cases was actually affected by this random variance. So they were close enough in score that it could upset part of the test. And that's one of the things I've always been worried about in testing. But we didn't feel that this was enough testing. So of course we tested more. So this brings us to this name mystery set of tests. So we needed to extend our testing to show that might show us if, this minute random variance, the MRV, has equal odds of putting all controls in all positions, or does it have unequal odds of putting all controls in all positions? And do equally scored pages de-index quickly? So during the Google Search Console deployment, when there was all the indexing issues, we were like, well, hey, is it all these tie conditions? Is that the thing? And we wanted to test for that. And can we demonstrate this random variance test fallibility? Can I make something, a ridiculous example, to show you how this can mess up your test? And so we had a number of reasons why we wanted to do a controls only SEO test. And so this is the specification. In past episodes, we've walked through these. But the main thing I want to point out here are these highlighted bits. This is where the controls and the test cases all vary. And the only way they vary is all 10 control pages have a random English ipsum word in a heading. Just one word in a heading, that's all that's in it. And instead of a random word in the heading on these test cases, I put in names. I put in Ted, I put in Kyle, I put in Lee. And that's the only way these things are different. The test cases are essentially control cases, except they have a name in the heading instead of a random word. And I thought I was being smart. I was like, okay, I'm going to demonstrate that MRV test fallibility, because I can just sit there on the page and hit refresh until Ted's number 1, and then I can do that 10 days in a row and say, look, having Ted in a heading is an SEO factor. And I thought I was the smartest guy in the world for using test cases as controls in my controls only test. And of course, you know what happens whenever you think you're the smartest guy in the world, right? Holy crap. What we found was Google has a bias against the names in the headings, not against the random words in the headings, but against the names. We see this nice variance that we are expecting, and we are expecting these to be distributed just those controls, but they're not. They all just kind of plummet to the bottom. We see a little bit of MRV around the edge, but we just see this. And I believe it was Lee who pointed out that the odds of this happening with 10 different websites and these number of tests and controls is roughly 1 in 300. So we really got to favor the hypothesis that, hey, something about this, Google doesn't like it all. So any initial thoughts on that, guys?
I kind of expected Kyle's name to be de-indexed.
Yeah, I'm surprised I wasn't last. I don't understand how that didn't happen.
Well, so we started hypothesizing about what could be wrong, and somebody in the Skype group said, hey, Ted, I know you're a fan of this English Ipsum stuff, but, really it's probably throwing your test. So I retested. I used random alpha instead of English Ipsum, and a couple of things happened. First of all, these test sites were all in the 90% range for indexing. They all popped to 100 with the random alpha. So indexing got a little bit better when I left from the English Ipsum to the alpha.
Can you tell people real quick what the heck the random alpha is?
That's what I was going to.
Yeah, just generating fictitious words by using random letters. So English Ipsum, we take the top 3,000 most used English words, and we just randomly choose from those. And they're used so frequently, they're devoid of context. It's like where, who, has, without, the, if, and so your text sounds like that, but there's no context in it because the words are just too commonly used to have context. And then with the random alpha, we're just generating things that look like words but aren't actually words. They're just random gibberish. And so we switched from English Ipsum to that random alpha, and our indexing got a little bit better. And so that, on a side note, is an interesting finding because it means, what's going on? Why does Google prefer random gibberish to the English Ipsum? And what I think is happening is that Google has stop words on its side that it's not including in its calculations and analysis. And a lot of those stop words are in the English Ipsum. So if a lot of the English Ipsum is not being included, then they're a lot more similar than they are different. And so it's probably those similarities that cause the indexing issues. So English Ipsum probably needs to be updated to not be the top 1,000 most used words. It needs to be, the top, from the top 2,000 to 3,000. We need not the most common ones. We need to get outside the stop words and then get those. And so we found a way to improve English Ipsum by shifting what words we pick. And that was a really cool finding. But there's still the bias. We still see names and headings being a problem. Any more thoughts before I continue?
No, just that's actually kind of a fun thing always in testing, that when you test something, it often leads to other findings that you weren't anticipating at all. That's kind of half the fun of doing these things.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the stupidest test I've ever done. And it's like discovering cool things. And so it's like, we'll run a test that only has control cases. Okay. And I'll use test cases as the controls to those control cases. And holy crap, it blew up our understanding. So we were thinking, what business purpose could this bias serve? And so the only one we could come up with, so a total failure of imagination on our part, was that maybe we triggered something like an anti-bullying algorithm. Why would you only use a first name in a heading if you weren't going to say something mean about them, and if that first name isn't a famous first name like Sting or something, or Prince, or so maybe it's an anti-bullying algorithm. So we thought we should just rule something like that out right away. So of course we added some obvious bullying into our test, and thus the Lee is stupid, Lee is a jerk, Ted is stupid, Ted is a jerk, Kyle is stupid, Kyle is a jerk test cases came into play. And unfortunately for our test, we see the variance that we expect. So we expected our initial test cases to be all over like we see here. And we see that with the bullying, but there is still a bias on the names only in the heading. What do you guys think?
I think Google was mad at Lee for some reason.
Yeah, Lee is not happy with this test. My apologies, Lee. But it's so weird, because why on earth would Google behave this way? And we have no way to explain what this is or why this is. But
could you inverse that test and have a positive? So instead of a jerk is awesome, is the best. That might create something different.
Yeah,
the sentiment of it.
We need to change the sentiment on some test cases, and we need to find out, is it limited? Like for a while I was like, oh, well, they just don't like one-word headings, but all of those controls are random one-word headings.
What kind of words, Ted? Are they English words, or are they just random letters?
Yeah, they're English ipsum. Well, they were English ipsum originally, and they all ranked fine and got the variance. And then we switched over to the random ones, and they worked just the same. So whether it was the English ipsum or the random alpha, the controls always behaved as expected. There's only the bias on the names.
I guess the question would be, how would Google know that that's a name? That Ted is a name and not an acronym, or Kyle is an actual word. Like, do you think that they would have a list of names and be able to say, like, these are names?
Yeah, there must be something. That's why I was thinking the anti-bullying made sense, because maybe they recognize a person's name in a heading, and it wasn't in a context they understood, so maybe they just flagged it as bullying. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
In a black hat world, I know it's easier. I've seen that it's easier to rank like negative stuff. Like it's a lot easier to put up a negative piece about a company than it is to take one down. So maybe it's the opposite too. So I think the sentiment test would actually be helpful in this case. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll give those tests a try, and we want to see if it's limited to names of people. So we might change to names of states or names of companies and run those tests.
Yeah, that brings in two of the points from the users, one from Matt and one from Pastor Duke, is what about using public names, brand names, product names, famous people, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So clearly we need more testing, but man, what a weird behavior out of Google. So a couple more things we learned. So we saw in this testing too, for the MRV test fallibility, we had the exact same test pages, same day, just minutes apart. We have Lee beating 3 controls and Lee not beating 3 controls, minutes apart. So this is that test fallibility I wanted to demonstrate. So if you're running like a 2 above, 2 below test, and you're only running it once and you're drawing conclusions from the outcome, this is the danger. This would be first position in that environment, and this would be a fail in that same environment. Same test pages, minutes apart. And that is why my latest testing that's new of this year, like we all were afraid of that. And there are ways to counter it. You test multiple times, you test the reverse, and that's what SIA does. So they largely catch these things. And the risk is typically with weaker factors. Strong factors don't really experience the MRV effects. But what I've been doing, especially in these tests, is 10 different websites concurrently and 10 control cases. And that kind of gives me this visibility into the variance on what's a signal and what's not. And then, of course, we have to look at the indexing. And the indexing of these experiments also showed us some interesting things about Google. So what ended up happening while these tests were being indexed, I thought they were golden. So I started testing minutes apart right away. And then all of a sudden I saw, oh, well, sites 1 through 3 aren't 100%. And then I search a couple minutes later, oh, they are 100%, but site 10 isn't at 100% indexing. And what I believe this is that there's incremental propagation out to all the data centers. It doesn't throw all the data at once. It's like working off of a central transaction log. And each data center says, okay, what's the little nugget I need to incorporate to be one step closer to being like the master data center? And so it's working off that transaction log one little tidbit at a time, and they're not all at the same places, but they're working off that transaction log to eventually be similar. And so what we're seeing here is differences in that incremental propagation between the data centers for indexing. And so we did testing earlier this year on does maturation time matter? And so we took tests where we deployed the tests immediately without letting the test pages settle. And then we had some test pages that settled, and then we eventually changed them and re-indexed them. And then we waited a couple weeks. And then at the end, we went and looked at them and said, hey, are the results fundamentally different? And every time we did that, no, we got the same outcomes every time. That maturation time did not affect the ultimate outcome of the test at all. But maturation time does matter if you're not fully indexed on all the data centers. That will affect your test results. So you need to wait until you're constantly rolling 100% on each of those data centers. Any thoughts on the indexing discoveries?
Well, one thing I think about, you'd have to assume that the control center is Mountain View, right? That's where the main, so why not just set everything to Mountain View, and then you'd know what your actual ranking is, and and then you could get past any kind of propagation bias or kind of that built-in variance just by moving data centers,
But isn't the average real-world ranking, or isn't the real-world ranking your average across all the public data centers?
I'm not sure. I don't know. Is
So Yeah, if you want a realistic ranking of what's happening out in the world, I think you kind of have to look at what's going on multiple data centers.
Or could you ping those different data centers and you could figure out how that role works so that you could see, you could get rid of like a transitional rank. You could, when something happens and you shift, maybe the transitional rank is just what rolls through the data centers. It's not on, say, a main one.
Yep, that makes sense. So there's, two interesting things here is that, we have evidence of the incremental propagation, but then we also have this other evidence of every search we did is rolling a different data center, request by request. And so that's another thing that we need to be mindful of. So all told, we created 450 single variable test pages that were used on 30 different test websites. And we had to get all those created, deployed, and indexed. And at the end of it, we still have no idea why Google dislikes our names and headings. So, what do you think of our conclusion?
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that. I have no idea. I've thought about it since this came out. I really don't have any answer.
What do you think, Clint?
Someone pointed out that GMBs give Google millions of names to parse. Could it be that they're doing that and kind of, how you're talking about the stop words? They're using names as stop words.
Oh, that interesting.
So really, that's actually being seen as no header.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess we have to put some empty headers in as additional test cases, see what they do. Because if the empty ones go or have variance throughout, then it's not that.
So now I use my one good idea for the day, so my clients are screwed.
All right. Well, that's all I had. Maybe we can turn to some audience questions. It doesn't have to be about this topic. It would be cool if it is, but in general is fine.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Matt asked, do you think Mountain View could be considered their primary data center, where that's where they're, running and saying this is the rankings, et cetera, and then they push that out to everyone else?
I think that's a good hypothesis. I don't think that's proven yet, and I wonder how we could prove a primary data center, which one is the master. So I don't know. I like the hypothesis. I just don't know how to verify it's true.
Yeah, that'd be cool to be able to prove that, because then you can, with that information, which one to where you work towards.
Yep.
All right, folks, any other questions? I got everyone else's all the way up to the top. So if you have any questions, now would be the time. Now, while we're doing that, since we do talk about POP, you launched a new feature inside of that stupid thing. What actually does it do? Because to me, it looks like just another button.
Yeah, it is another button. Actually, I think the number one complaint people have with the tool is getting competitors in. And so this addresses that. You hit the button, and while variations are being fetched, or matchwords, if you will, we're also grabbing the top 20 competitors and giving you some data on use of like your exact keyword in like the meta title and H tags, word count, HTML tags total there, and if they're using schema or not, so you can get some ideas to whether that might be a good on-page competitor or not.
Awesome. I've been dying for that.
I know. And then you just check the box, and then you select the ones you want, and they go right in.
Okay. But that doesn't alleviate an SEO's job to go out there and actually look at those sites and make sure that they're truly competitors, right?
Which is also why there's a link and you can click and go look at them, which you should do for sure.
Cool. We got our first questions from Intersoil. Let's make it more difficult. Some languages are problematic, like RTL for Hebrew, and if not, also Chinese. So that's another twist on that name test.
Yeah, the main issue with me testing in other languages is I don't speak those languages. So I become dependent upon Google Translator, which we know is a flawed system.
What if you use Microsoft Translator?
Well, I think the best solution to the how do we try this in different languages is we need an SEO community that has testers that speak different languages. So that would be the best solution. I'm not sure what a good enough solution is. I suppose, maybe Google Translate is good enough until we have such a community.
Pastor Duke, you would think that the data center that first shows indexing would be the primary. That's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I really like that hypothesis too. But then the trick is, how do we know which one first shows it? That might be a tricky thing to do since they have hundreds of data centers.
Yeah, I guess
we could launch an identical page from different locations. It would be across different domains, so you've got that. But the idea is launch them all basically simultaneously from different locations and see which one indexes.
That would under the assumption that the search console that you're submitting it with would be also geo-targeted to that data center too. So.
That's right. That's right. So, but we could play with it. We get 10 people listening right now in 10 different locations and launch them up.
Yeah, sure. Michael Haley, names, would it be best to also try Spanish Indian names? Yep, kind of the same question, so that's good. I think we just got that one. All right, folks, anything else?
Oh, I like this. It's an early lunch for me.
Yeah, so you all gave in. You gave high.
I get hungry. A couple of questions here. Let's see. I skipped questions apparently. Let me look. No, not seeing it.
Yeah, I don't understand Internasil's question from above. So maybe if you could rephrase it.
I think we just answered that one. The names, using different names. And Ryan, looks like YouTube filtered your question, so send that back again. It's not here, unless I'm completely blinded.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I think it might have been filtered.
Yeah.
Or are we just ignoring you?
Here's a good one. What's the hot ranking factor this week?
That's a good question. I haven't pulled that data this week, so I can't honestly answer it yet.
Slacker. And I'm only doing mine once a month, so let's see. E-commerce question. If you had a product page ranking for the broad keyword related to that product, but mostly category pages were ranking, would you create a category page and 301?
Well, if it's ranking, I wouldn't. I'd like to keep that product page ranking for a killer term, personally, because that's your closest point to the checkout funnel.
Yeah, I think if Google is going to give you the product page and they're showing everyone else's category pages, you kind of own that, because it could be a sign that they're transitioning to products versus categories. You're narrowing it down. So that might be a good opportunity there for you. I wouldn't mess with it. If it's already ranking, why dick with it?
I guess the question is, how well is it ranking? I mean, if it's ranking on page 5,
True.
Yeah, then yeah. But if you're on page 1,
yeah. I always thought it would be a killer e-commerce experiment, and Google's probably going to hate me for sharing this idea, because somebody out there is going to be crazy enough to do it. To design your e-commerce store to be cross-site. So all of your category pages are on one domain, all of your product pages are on another domain, all of your blog pages are on another domain. And this combination of multiple sites with a cross-site shopping cart is your one store. But then none of your categories, none of your products, none of your blog posts cannibalize each other. They all rank independently. So they can all target the same terms and they can all rank in the page.
I like it.
So, in his case, his product page is ranking number 3. I would definitely not touch that.
I would not touch that.
Yeah, I'd leave it alone. Sounds like a win.
All you can do is go down.
Yeah. And then Ryan's question is, what is your favorite backlink provider and service?
Clint Butler.
Yeah, that sounds like a you question.
I guess if you're looking for a service, I would use Semantic Mastery for their Google stacks, their RYS stacks. If you don't understand why those are special and why they cost so much more, you probably should get the RYS Reloaded training and leverage that. I use magicpr.net for PRs, and then everything else we do in-house because I'm a control freak and I don't trust other people with my link building. That would answer that. Kyle, you don't have any favorites?
In SIA, we did a lot of tests with SEO Autopilot, and a lot of their stuff moved the needle in test environments, and I was pretty impressed by that.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Not everything, but most of their stuff did. When you look at like success rates on stuff that we've done, I think they're one of the highest.
Yep, for sure. Let's see. How do you approach tier 2 anchor text? We're going to save that question for another show, Dan. I got a presentation. I already gave most of it at SEO Spring Training. But this part I actually want to share with the SEO Fight Club group, and we'll schedule that on another future show. Let's see. And then last question for today. What are your thoughts on local citation services such as BrightLocal or Moz?
We use BrightLocal in our agency. And I also use Whitespark too for some things. So we go back and forth, but I think we lean on BrightLocal the most.
Yeah. I use Moz, their local. It's $89. Submit to the aggregators. I guess you can do that in BrightLocal as well for like $79. So save yourself $10. And
I feel like I'm on like a monthly plan with BrightLocal that you pay a monthly, and then they do that for all your sites. But it obviously has to be cost effective. They have enough clients in.
Yeah, our Moz local is 1 year. So
right,
and then you just update every changes or whatever for 1 year. I also use Yext. A lot of people hate on Yext. 78 sites the last time I checked. About 48 of them indexed. The rest are really just mobile apps, etc. I like that. That's pretty good. It doesn't submit to the aggregators, though. That's why you guys combine with Moz Local. But that's a good one. And plus, you providing an extra value to your customers adding all those premium features, and then when they fire you, you take all that crap away. And who cares what Yext does with them after that? All right, that's it, Ted.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Please do subscribe. It helps us unlock YouTube features. And we're making the push for 2,000. So if you have not subscribed, please do. Ring the bell if you want to get alerts, or don't if you want to be left alone. Either way is fine with us. The important part is those subscriptions, so we unlock those features. And do check out SEO This Week with Clint Butler. It's an amazing show, so check that out too. Hey guys, are there any speaking events, any last news you want to shout out?
June, I'll be in Dallas for DFW SEM. And I'm probably going to do a little meet and greet beforehand, or like the day before. People want to do cocktails or whatever.
Yes.
So hit me up.
It's horribly hot in Dallas in June. Could you done that somewhere cool?
I assume the venue has air conditioning. I'm good.
All right, and do get on the wait list if you did not get into the Skype group. We will find a way to help you out eventually. It just might take us a little time to figure out how. But we will process that list in the order that you sign up. So if we get 10 new spots open, it's going to be the first 10 on that list. All right, take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.